Hi, I'm Heather Larkin, and I am an Athens, Georgia portrait photographer. And what I do is portraits of little girls dressed as fairies, or ballerina dancers, or just families and kids for straight up regular portraits. So I want a lens that feels magical. Sigma has a brand new 135 1.4 DGDN art lens. It's a world first 135 1.4. And I know I wondered how it compared to its, and I know I wondered how it compared to the older 105 1.4 that Sigma used to have. Years ago, I had the now discontinued 105 1.4, and it was my go to amazing lens for magical children's portraits. So you can see I've got two lenses in front of me, and they're very similar. But would it surprise you to know that the 105 is actually the bigger one? That's right. This is the 105, and here is the 135. I'm going to put up the specs on the screen, so let's go over them. The 105 is 3.62 pounds, 4.56 by 5.18 inches. Filter size in front of the glass is 105 millimeters. It has 9 aperture blades, and the minimum focus distance is 100 centimeters. The 135 is 3.13 pounds, 4.4 by 5.3 inches. Filter size is the same, 105 millimeters. It has 13 aperture blades, and the minimum focus distance is 110 centimeters. In almost every piece of number-wise, the 135 wins. I got the 135 out of the box and I was like, it looks really close to the 105. And I thought they were going to be exactly the same size. And then I put them side by side and I was really surprised that the older 105 is longer, it's heavier, it has fewer aperture blades. So in size, the 135 wins. You know, it's smaller front to back. In weight, the 135 wins. And I would say it's balanced better as well because it weighs less, but it's also shorter and therefore closer to the camera. So you've got that like pivot. And if you're holding it up to your face 200 times an hour, that becomes, a little bit of weightlifting. And it makes a difference. Like it makes a difference in how I feel later on the next day. On reach, the 135 wins. Now, this is, I would say wins in air quotes because this is an extremely personal feeling, what you like and what you don't like. I would say it has more reach than the 105, but whether that's a win or an advantage is up to you. Some people don't want to be that far back and the 105 would work better for them. The bokeh roundness at the edge, the 135 wins absolutely hands down. It is just smooth and the highlights are round and everything's bright and it's just such a joy to work with. For autofocus speed, the 135 wins also because the 105 is older technology. Things have been updated. This one has like a dual HLA motor. So two little motors moving the glass around in there at the same time. And so it arrives accurately and quickly every time. For front glass size, absolutely the same. They both have that 105 millimeter front filter size. Then aperture blades. The 135 wins again. 9 aperture blades on the 105, 13 on the 135, which means that the little out of focus highlights in the background of your portraits are rounder as opposed to hexagonal. And then lastly, the minimum focus distance. Now, on this one, the 105 wins, but only by 4 inches-ish. It's 100 centimeters versus 110 centimeters on the 135. And for everything else, I kind of don't even care about the minimum focus distance on this lens because for framing and, beautiful portraits, I don't need to be right on top of whoever it is that I'm photographing. So I set up a kind of test in my living room with some Christmas lights in the back and so that we could compare the two of them together side by side. All right, so you can see I have, this is a like a little picture of my living room with the lights in the background, and I set up a light with a feather and, took these from the same distance. So up here you can see the lens information. This is 105 millimeters, so the 105 at, pretty far back, so that all of the bokeh blends together and creates this lovely smush. And I would consider this amazing, but the 135 looks even better. Now, granted, these are from the same distance away from the wall, and so the 10 or the 135 has more reach, but that doesn't take away in any way from how amazing the overlap of that is. So a little bit closer so that they're not as blending together, the 105 and then the 135. You see how the 135 has more reach, but it just blends a little bit better. Then I put a feather up in front, and so the 105 at 1.4, and then the 135 at 1.4. And I think that these are really, really good indicators of how the lens will behave later on. And so I think that the thing that thrills me the most is having all of that overlap back here. Even stop down. So this is the 105 at 2.8. Now at 2.8, you can see that these are getting a little hexagonal in the little circles back here. But at 2.8 on the 135, they are round. Now you can see that these are getting a little hexagonal back here in the little circles, the little highlights, and now you can see that these are getting a little hexagonal here in the highlights on the 105, and the 135 is a lot more round. Now I just took some pictures of me, tried to frame up the same 105 versus 135 just so you could see a little bit. It's hard to do a portrait and frame up everything, but gives you a pretty clear idea. Now, that said, I'm going to show you some of my previous years past images with the 105, some of my current images with the 135. So let's look at those now. These are just going to be older images, and I'm going to point out what I like about them and what could be, a little bit better. I like all of how the background is nice and smushy. You can still tell she's in a garden, but it doesn't feel quite as soft as I feel like it could be. I like seeing her hair, but her hair's just a little on the crunchy side. Not as magical as I would like. Here you've got this little baby, and he's all in focus, but also the background of the ferns gets a little distracting. That's a lot going on in this picture. It's definitely better in this image because he's further away from the background, and this is lovely and great and what I would consider, non-distracting. This is still one of my favorite images. I love how you can tell she's in a garden, but it's far enough back. But these, like this chair is probably 30, 40 feet from the plants in the background. I don't always have that much room between my subject and the background to separate them. Like this right here, she is only 20 feet away from the background here, and it's a lot more distracting back here. So I would like a little bit more separation. Got this nice bridge, and all the leading lines are nice, but especially in this next one, it starts to get a little much going on in the image. It starts to look a little chaotic, And so I love this, but I think it can get better. Now, one thing that the 105 does a really well, or a really amazing job at, is backlighting. And so like this is just great, but still back here, I feel like it could be a little bit smoother in the color transitions. This is great, but a little chaotic. This is lovely. I love all of this. It looks great. And then this starts to get into a little bit more chaos back here than I would prefer. But the color transition and the shading on this one is lovely. Same here, you can see that she's in like a parking lot, and it's just a little on the distracting side. Nice garden setting. This one still remains one of my absolute favorite images that I've ever taken. This just looks gorgeous, and I hope to get many more images like this with the 135. So now 135 images. I first took pictures of it without people in front because I wanted just to see how it behaves and the autofocus and whatnot. I don't even know why I did this because it was completely on. This is at 1.4. I was, you know, I think maybe about 5 feet away from this droplet on this piece of grass. And that one droplet's in focus, but the rest of them aren't, and tips of the grass are not. And it doesn't need to be like that. Was the whole point of this test. And also the little highlights here are nice and round. I love it. And then I just got a little bit more creative playing with the depth of field and how narrow it can be and what I could do with that, and really enjoying it. This, I got a little creative with the processing. I wanted to set apart the butterfly from the background. So the plants are already kind of purple, but I just made them more purple. And then I started photographing things that aren't necessarily separated well from their background. So this is a rose bush. It's just 3 roses, and the rest of the rose bush is back there, but it's artistic, it's painterly. There's a lot of nice gradual transition in the edges there. Japanese maple, lovely. I can see all of what's in focus here, and nothing else back here matters. And then when I was walking along at this garden, a squirrel just sat there and posed really beautifully for me. And so I took a portrait to test the autofocus speed. And it was great because it stayed there and let me do that. All of this falling off in the background really helps separate the squirrel from all of this chaotic branches going on. So then it was people time. So this is Winnie, and Winnie did not want to have anything to do with me that day, and so it was a whole list of fun things to do with Winnie to get her distracted from having a camera interface. But because the 135 is long, I could stay back and let her do her thing and then just make noises so that she would look at me. My favorite part about this image right here is all of the highlights in the back. This is great. She's actually laughing at Dad off to the camera right, and who's making silly faces at her. And I love this whole thing. This is what I look forward to for the rest of the time that I own this lens. Foreground elements here are great, and the background just falls away. Absolutely gorgeous. Her makeup is a main character in this image, but also so is the background, like all of the smush back here in the background. It allows her eyes to come straight forward and be in sharp focus, and I'm just so in love absolutely in love. This entire alleyway back here, she's nice and backlit, but the background isn't competing with her. Same here. She's nice and backlit. The background is glittery, but not chaos. These two girls are so precious. I wanted a little bit of foreground elements back here, or in front rather, and then I also wanted to see what it did with the out of focus elements in the back, and I would say that it frames them beautifully. And then these are really difficult because I have to cram myself in between a tree and a fence and then back up far enough to frame this and still get flowers. And I wanted all of like the flowers to fall away and look magical, but still be enough to see the skirt and their faces. So I'd say it did a beautiful job with that. Haha, this girl. I asked her to do this dance move, and she was like, I feel like Spider-Man. And I just happened to have the camera up at the time and caught Spider-Man, and she thought it was hilarious. I did too. But the leading lines of the handrails are such that it leads your eye to her. You can see where she is. She's in an urban area. You can see that there's telephones back here, but telephone wires back here, but it's not competing with her. I think that's the best part about this lens. Like, you get a sense of environmental portrait, but it's not competing with the subject. Same here. I get a little bit of glitter, I get a little bit of story and location, but I don't need the focus to be on the background. I need the focus to be on her. Now, if we go back, so here's that. If we go back to this, pay attention to this right here with the 105 and that with the 135. Now, this is what I was hoping it would do, and it does it. So I want all of this to just fall away and let me focus on her and what she's doing and her skill and her talent and her art form, and not the background. Absolutely, that's what it does. Same here. This is literally a parking deck. It had poured 20 minutes before, and the ground was still wet. It was still kind of dark. Because it's a 1.4, I could open up to 1.4. Now, all of these are shot at 1.4. Yes, they are. But the extra bit of light in there definitely saved. And then this image, just out of camera frame on this side is a trash can, and just out of camera frame on this side is a trash can. So I needed to kind of be between two elements that I didn't want in the image and still have enough room for her to move within the frame, which it does beautifully. Still with a fall off back here, and I don't have to worry about a whole bunch of lines competing with her because they're blurry in the background. And it's fun to look at the images that I have already done with one lens and the images that I've already done with another lens and, enjoy them for themselves. But it's hard to compare how the bokeh really looks on one lens versus another without seeing that side by side in a real life portrait situation. So now I'm going to go take pictures of the same subject, hopefully frame them pretty close, and we're going to look at the background of those side by side. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the 135 and the 105 side by side together. I attempted to frame up similar pictures, and without a tripod, it's pretty much impossible, but I did the best that I could. So this is the 135, and here's the 105. These are unedited, like presented without edit, and what I really found intriguing is that even at 1.4, the 135 is brighter than the 105. I don't know how, but it is. Also, see this right back here? These highlights are just like, I can see the edges on them, whereas the 135 I cannot. Like, it's just smush in the background. It's perfect. And then in terms of background, here's the 135. And then there's the 105. Pay attention to this part again, right here above her head. Much nicer. Much nicer. Now, it was raining. You can see the raindrops here. We were just doing the best we could. But I think that gives you a comparison point on where we are at with the two of the lenses together in a very, like, nearly attempted identical framing. I think the 135 wins unbelievably well. So what did you think? I know what I think, and I am 100% certain that the 135 1.4 is absolutely my new favorite lens and probably the world's best portrait lens. But I want to hear what you think.